I was still chewing a bite of bland cafeteria lasagna when the words dropped out of Trent's mouth like loose change from a ripped suit pocket. You'll be handling the entire reconciliation workflow going forward. No preamble, no warning, just that, as if he was handing me a memo about new coffee filters. The new VP, hair too gelled, shoes too shiny, and a PowerPoint addiction that could qualify for rehab, announced it 10 minutes into the all-hands cost optimization meeting. It was as if my entire team had been a clerical error he was finally correcting. We're sunsetting the reconciliation unit, but Arya here's got 15 years of institutional knowledge, he said, gesturing to me like I was a feature of the building. She's a rock star, a real team player. Rock star. I hadn't taken a full lunch break since Obama's first term. But sure, let's go with rock star. Across the room, Brenda's hand stopped mid-highlight over her audit binder. Julian, my newest hire, who still believed in things like performance reviews, went ghost white. No one spoke. They didn't have to. We all knew what it meant. They were gone, effective immediately, and I was the poor soul inheriting their workloads. No raise, no bonus, just a thank you for your flexibility. Trent beamed like he'd handed me a gift card, not a burning building. I smiled because here's the thing. I knew right then what I was going to do. I'd been used before, passed over, piled on, painted over. But this time, this time, I was going to leave a crater. If this story hits a nerve, if you've ever been the duct tape holding chaos together while they handed out balloons to the arsonists, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button. I'm gunning for my first 10K subscribers, and every click is a middle finger to every Trent out there. Trent moved on to something about Q4 projections. I didn't hear a damn word of it. I was too busy watching his mouth move while mentally packing my digital go bag. You know that quiet moment in a heist movie when the hacker's already in the system and the guards don't know they've been robbed? That was me. I was already archiving, already cataloging. They thought they were saving money. What they were really doing was detonating the only person who knew how the money worked. I had every audit report from the last 10 years. Custom templates, macros, red flag protocols, vendor history, footnotes buried deeper than Jimmy Hoffa. My team didn't just balance books. We played financial triage on a quarterly basis to make sure these clowns didn't get torched by the IRS or faceplant during investor reviews. Now I was alone with everything. I kept smiling. Trent kept talking. The room stayed frozen in that surreal, too quiet office tension, the kind that buzzes behind your teeth like an oncoming migraine. He wrapped the meeting with a nauseating, "Let's keep pushing forward," and left like he'd just awarded me a trophy. I stood there a moment longer, watching the Zoom window close, the echo of false praise still ringing in my ears. Then I opened a new document. I titled it, "For When They Panic." Arya showed up Friday morning like nothing had happened. Cardigan pressed, hair twisted up in the same no-nonsense bun she'd worn since 2009, and a travel mug that said #1 Mom, even though her kids were grown and living in different time zones. She walked past the glass offices where managers pretended not to notice the carnage they greenlit the day before. No one made eye contact. No one dared. Her desk looked the same, but something fundamental had changed. She booted up her computer, opened the Master Reconciliation Workbook, and hit Save As. Not to the shared drive, not to the finance folder. She named it Final Binder Personal Copy, XLSX, and tucked it deep into a password-locked folder, buried in a flash drive she kept under a post-it in her drawer, labeled Holiday Recipes. Trent could walk in with a subpoena, and he'd still be searching by Labor Day. Arya spent the morning documenting everything, every invoice format, every reconciliation cycle, vendor-specific quirks, who to call when the Oracle system hiccuped and claimed the same $18,000. Twice. She wrote like she was preparing for the rapture, and nobody else had a map. She did not tell anyone. they hadn't earned the blueprint. By lunch, she had 37 pages of bullet points peppered with footnotes like, "Don't trust Q2 numbers from 2021. The VP manually altered them for optics, and red flag vendor number 1643 always submits padded invoices during audit weeks. Auditors flagged this 3 times. CFO ignored. Little landmines she knew the auditors loved to trip over. Normally, she'd correct them quietly, fix the books, protect the company, but she was done being the invisible cleanup crew. In meetings, she smiled, nodded, wrote things like, "I'll look into it, and thanks for the update," even when what she meant was, "You absolute buffoon, you just approved a $42,000 mistake with your initials on it." Trent popped into one of those Friday stand-ups like he was hosting a bake sale. "Hey, Arya, just wanted to check in. How's the transition going? Need anything?" She could have said, "Yes, I need you to go back to whatever marketing think tank spawned you." She didn't. Instead, she gave him the same dead-eyed smile she used for malfunctioning printers and said, "All good, I'm keeping things steady." He nodded like a golden retriever who'd been told he was a good boy. "That's what I like to hear." She watched him walk away and thought about how easily people like him dismissed the groundwork as background noise. The reconciliation team had been the skeleton of this operation, unseen, taken for granted. God help you if it snapped. By Monday, Arya had started a second document. This one was titled Questions Auditors Usually Ask, DocX. Every time someone forgot to loop her into a vendor adjustment or skipped recon protocol because we've always done it that way, she logged it, not to fix it, but to remember. She began practicing silence like it was a weapon. She'd nod through meetings while mentally counting the unfiled reports that were supposed to be uploaded weekly. She stopped reminding people, stopped saving them from themselves. It didn't take long to notice no one else had any idea what her team actually did. Not the cadence, not the tools, not even where the reports lived. Half the files were on her local machine because Brenda didn't trust cloud storage, and the other half required login credentials that expired monthly. No one even knew the password schema. She'd been the failsafe, the firewall, and now she was quietly, meticulously shutting herself off. Arya left the office at 5:01 that evening, her private audit binder zipped up on a flash drive in her purse. She passed Trent in the hallway. He smiled again. She smiled back, but this time, it wasn't fake. It was surgical. Arya had never liked the phrase quiet quitting. It sounded like something the interns posted on TikTok while sipping $7 coffee and filming day in the life reels. What she was doing wasn't quiet. It was symphonic. It started with her calendar. The hours she used to spend checking team output, scrubbing ledger imports, and cleaning up after Trent's spreadsheet tantrums, those became external stakeholder calls and vendor syncs. That was her code. In reality, she was fielding interviews, Zoom calls during lunch breaks in her car, her blazer slung over her usual cardigan, dashboard fan blowing just enough to keep her from melting under the Ohio sun. "Tell us about a time you resolved a high-pressure financial oversight under tight deadlines," one recruiter asked, smiling like this was a game show. Arya grinned back. "Just last quarter, our controller approved a duplicate payout to a vendor who was already flagged for overbilling. We caught it before the check cleared. No one above me even noticed." They nodded like she'd solved world hunger. Inside, Arya felt nothing. Not pride, not joy. Just the cold, methodical relief of someone who knows the fire escape is right where it should be. Back at the office, she began the cleanup, not for them, but for herself. Old Slack threads gone, personal notes on the shared drive deleted, long-winded email chains with Brenda about shady vendor activity, and quarterly adjustment anomalies archived to a personal Gmail, then scrubbed from the company servers. She ghosted herself, 1 kilobyte at a time. The thing about being essential is, people assume you'll always be there, so no one noticed the trail going cold. No one asked why the Arya folder was suddenly half its size, or why all those macros they depended on now said REF. She watched them flail politely. Then HR sent the email. Subject: Knowledge Transfer Planning Request for Discussion. She stared at it for a full 30 seconds. HR had that uniquely soulless tone, like they were asking if you could train your replacement with the same cheer as baking brownies for a potluck. Arya clicked mark as unread. 2 days later, they followed up. Just checking to see if you saw our last message. Please let us know a good time to meet. She flagged it. Let it rot. If they wanted knowledge transfer, they could hire a psychic or maybe try divining the process from the crumbs left behind in her draft folders. Every night now, she walked out of the building exactly at 5 p.m., not 5:01, not 5:06, after answering just one more question from the CFO. 5 yuck, dead on. And every time she passed that "We're all in this together" poster in the hallway, she wanted to staple her resignation letter to it, just for the poetry. On Thursday, she walked into a meeting where Trent was showcasing a new efficiency matrix he got from a leadership podcast. He stood in front of a slide that said, "We rise by lifting others," in Comic Sans. Arya, you've been with us a long time. You embody so much of our core DNA. He beamed. She smiled. Thank you, Trent. He went on about integration, synergy, elasticity, whatever MBA salad he'd marinated in that week. Meanwhile, she mentally accepted the offer that hit her inbox that morning. Better title, more money. A boss who used like as a verb and not a threat. The world around her kept spinning its shallow corporate theater. But Arya had already left the building. All that was left was her shadow, and even that was starting to fade. It was a Tuesday morning when the CFO stopped by her desk with a coffee-stained mug that read, "I excel at Excel," and a casual tone that didn't match the stakes of the conversation. Hey, Arya, just touching base. Audit season's creeping up. Everything on track? She didn't even look up from her screen. Absolutely. He nodded, sipped his coffee like it didn't taste like printer ink and denial. Then he wandered off, confident that the woman who'd quietly saved his backside year after year would do it again, just like always. Except not this time. Because Arya had already accepted a new offer. Salary bump, fewer hours, an actual assistant, a boss who started emails with "Hi" instead of "Per my last request." She was gone, not metaphorically, not emotionally, contractually. Her last day was exactly 2 days before the audit. Back on her screen, the central audit folder looked fine. Neat, organized, calm, like a pond right before it's poisoned. But that folder was a ghost. She hadn't updated the reconciliation logs in over 3 weeks. The vendor summaries were 6 months out of date, and the financial controls checklist, the one auditors usually asked for first, was filled with placeholder text she'd written in a fit of sarcasm. Definitely not where the fraud lives. That file alone was worth her entire severance package in karmic value. Of course, her private version was flawless, updated nightly, stored on a fireproof SSD in her bag labeled "Not Your Audit V2." She spent her afternoons watching the company float deeper into the fog, completely unaware their compass had already walked out the door in orthopedic flats and a cardigan with loose buttons. They had no idea the fire was already smoldering beneath them, just hadn't smelled the smoke yet. And Arya, she stood there like a forest spirit, watching it all from a distance, calmly holding a box of matches. There was a strange beauty in it, the kind you feel right before a thunderstorm. That pregnant silence when the world doesn't know it's seconds from being torn wide open. Trent breezed by later that day. Hey, Arya, mind if I add you to a client call Thursday about their year-end questions? Won't be available then, she said without blinking. Oh. He tilted his head like a confused pug. I have prior commitments. He laughed awkwardly. Busy season, huh? Appreciate you holding the fort. And still, he didn't ask, didn't notice, didn't know. That was the thrill of it. She could have screamed, "I'm leaving in 11 days!" into the break room microwave, and no one would have noticed unless it affected the coffee supply. Could have tattooed her resignation on Trent's forehead and he'd still ask if she could hop on just one more day to scrub next week. The documents remained untouched, the reports untouched, the trust unshaken. That night, as she zipped up her bag and shut down her machine, she paused to look at the dry erase board across the hall. Someone had drawn a crude rocket ship and written, "Auditors incoming, let's blast off." She smiled, shut off the lights, and walked out, knowing the countdown had already begun, and they were heading for a launch with no navigation, no coordinates, and no Aria. Just a smiling VP, a clueless CFO, and a central folder full of fiction. Aria timed it down to the hour. 2 weeks and 2 days before the audit, she drafted the email. No dramatic subject line, no teary manifesto, just notice of resignation. Aria Dorsey. 1 paragraph. Effective 2 weeks from today, thank you for the opportunity, etc., etc. Signed with the kind of clinical precision usually reserved for surgery or war. She clicked send at 9:03 a.m. By 9:09, the building was whispering, not loud, not frantic, just the soft, incredulous buzz that floats through cubicle farms like pollen. Aria's leaving? Is that even allowed? What are we going to do about the audit? By 9:15, HR had her in a windowless room, blinking like they'd seen a ghost. They offered her a paper cup of water. She declined. We, were surprised, the HR rep stammered. Her badge said, Cynthia, People and Culture, which always struck Aria as funny, as if a name tag could fix culture. Well, Aria said gently, you did lay off my entire team and triple my workload with no additional compensation. Eventually, that sort of math adds up. Cynthia shifted uncomfortably. We're hoping you could help us with a knowledge transfer plan, before the audit. Aria gave the kind of smile you use at funerals. I'll do what I can. That night, she began compiling the training materials. Not the current reconciliation flow, not the updated vendor dispute logs, or the master audit checklist with all the embedded formulas and risk flags. No, she dug into the archives and pulled out reports from 2 years ago. Templates that had been deprecated, tools the auditors no longer asked about, macros that broke after system updates. She packaged it all in a neat little PowerPoint titled Reconciliation Overview, Historical Context. It had charts. It had clip art. It had zero relevance. She delivered it on day 3 of her notice period to the interim analyst, a 26-year-old MBA with more ambition than sense, who smiled earnestly and nodded as she explained why vendor classification codes were important in 2021. Got it, he said, highlighting bullet points like he was preparing for the SATs. Aria nodded back. You're a quick study. You'll do fine. The VP, Trent, called her into his office later that day. He looked like someone had canceled his TED Talk. Aria, he began, putting on his best concerned but still your leader voice. I have to admit, I'm disappointed. I had high hopes for you. She blinked. You mean after firing my team and burying me under their workload? He sighed. We were leaning into your strengths. You've always been a stabilizing force. I thought you were committed. She leaned forward slightly, tone perfectly measured. I was committed for 15 years. Then you decided I was disposable. He opened his mouth, but whatever he was about to say shriveled up and died. Aria stood, adjusted her cardigan like armor, said, I'm happy to assist in the transition. I've provided training documentation and outlined historical processes. He didn't catch the emphasis. No one ever did, until it was too late. By Friday, her calendar was a graveyard of vague meeting titles. Sync, Touchpoint, Strategy Review. She attended them all, nodded when necessary, and watched them circle the drain in real time. Each time someone asked a specific question, where the vendor log thresholds lived, or how to reconcile the intercompany transactions for Q3, she tilted her head, paused, and said, that would have been Brenda's territory, right? They'd mutter, making notes like Brenda might materialize out of a fog with a USB stick and salvation. Arya had never felt lighter. She slept better, drank her coffee slower. She even started parking in the visitor lot out of spite, daring someone to say something. At night, she rehearsed what she'd say on her final day. Something gracious but sharp, a line that would echo in the building long after she was gone. But that was still 9 days away. Plenty of time left to watch the floorboards creak under their weight, to let the fire spread quietly behind the walls, to smile, offer empty guidance, and walk them lovingly toward the cliff. By the start of her final week, the office smelled like panic. Burnt coffee, cheap printer toner, the collective flop sweat of people realizing they trusted the wrong person to stay. Monday's audit prep meeting was called for 9 o'clock a.m. sharp. Trent insisted on donuts. Arya arrived at 8:57 with a fresh notepad, a pen that didn't work, and a facial expression so neutral it could have passed for Buddhist enlightenment. She took a seat near the door. The conference room was packed. The intern, Derek, brought a laptop that wouldn't connect to the projector. Cynthia from HR hovered like someone waiting for a smoke alarm to go off. The interim analyst, what was his name, Greg, had printed out 3-month-old reconciliation logs and highlighted them in pink for reasons unknown to God or finance. Trent clapped his hands. "All right, team, let's get aligned." Nobody was aligned. "Arya," he said cheerfully, like they were co-hosting a podcast, "can you walk us through the reconciliation file?" She tilted her head with the slow grace of a church bell. "Which one?" He blinked. The Q4 master?" She smiled faintly. "I didn't upload that version to the drive. I kept it local for data integrity, since version control became a problem last quarter." Someone actually gasped. She didn't turn to see who. Trent tried to laugh. "Okay, well, let's just use what's there." What was there was a patchwork of broken links, old templates, a spreadsheet that still had Julian's name on it, despite Julian being laid off 5 weeks ago and currently freelancing in Colorado. The screen lit up with chaos. Formulas referencing empty cells, tabs labeled "Use this one," and a red warning bar across the top that read, helpfully, "Data source unavailable." Trent soldiered on. "We can make this work, folks. We've got legacy docs. Let's pivot." Arya watched it unfold the way you'd watch your old house burn down after moving out. A quiet awe, not sad, not angry, just satisfied. The intern muttered, "Where's the Q3 variance log?" Someone else chimed in. "Has anyone seen the current vendor dispute list?" Greg flipped frantically through his binder of outdated screenshots. "I thought Arya went over that last week." Arya, still calm, replied, "That was a training session on 2021 formats. That's not helpful." She shrugged. By 9:26, people were visibly sweating. Trent tugged at his collar. Cynthia tapped on her iPad like she was texting God for a miracle. The best part? No one, not one single person, had thought to check whether this year's documents existed anywhere outside Arya's laptop. And they didn't, because Arya never uploaded them, never promised she would, never even pretended. She'd simply stopped updating the drive quietly months ago. She leaned back slightly in her chair, watched Greg whisper to Trent, watched Trent pretend to nod knowingly, and sipped her lemon water with the serenity of a woman at the end of a very long chess match. It wasn't just that things were falling apart. It was how they were falling apart, slowly, predictably, and with just enough time for everyone to realize the damage was self-inflicted. By noon, Arya was back at her desk, watching emails fly in with subject lines like, "Urgent, reconciliation flow, and can you resend that macro thingy from July?" She didn't answer. She opened her new job's welcome packet, scheduled a mani-pedi for Friday, and deleted a calendar invite titled Audit Prep Sync All Hands. Let them sink. Let them pivot. Let them dig through the rubble, chasing shadows of files that never existed. Arya was done saving them. She was already halfway out the door. They were just now noticing the house had no floor. Audit day hit like a freight train full of overdue invoices and karma. Arya arrived early, not out of loyalty, but to savor the spectacle with front-row seating and an iced coffee she sipped like champagne. She wore a navy blue blouse, subtle makeup, and the detached smile of someone attending an ex's wedding, just to confirm the bride looks nervous. By 8:47 a.m., the auditors were in the building, a 3-person team from a third-party compliance firm with clipboards, stern faces, and the emotional range of tax law. One of them even brought a suitcase that clicked open like a hitman's rifle case. Inside, laptops, flash drives, checklists printed in 8-point font. The CFO came down in a rush, sweating through his collar. "Let's make this smooth and efficient," he barked. "Everyone be responsive, be clear, and let's put our best foot forward." Trent nodded like a bobblehead in a convertible. "We've got this." They did not have this. Within the first 15 minutes, the auditors found 3 missing vendor confirmations, a duplicated purchase order, and an account labeled PSKEXP. Arya watched it unfold from her corner desk, like a woman watching her replacement try to assemble IKEA furniture with a spoon. At 9:16, the first Slack ping hit her screen. "Hey, Arya. Auditors asking about vendor dispute resolution flow. Can you hop in?" She didn't answer. 9:23. "Arya. They want to see how we closed the Q3 GL variance. Was that in the binder you reviewed with Greg?" "Nope." 9:31. "Need you in Conform ASAP, CFO's asking." She closed Slack. Then she opened her resignation confirmation email, read it twice, sipped her coffee, smiled. At 9:42, Cynthia from HR, poor frantic Cynthia, showed up at her desk looking like she'd just been hit by a compliance bus. "Arya, could you please step into the conference room? They're asking questions only you can answer." Arya powered down her screen with deliberate calm. "Oh, I'm afraid I clocked out 10 minutes ago, but it's still morning." "My final day ends at 9:30 a.m. sharp, as agreed," she said, standing and sliding her company badge across the desk like a poker chip. "Anything after that is voluntary." Cynthia blinked. "The auditors will need to work with the team," Arya said, stepping into her coat. "I've done my part." Down the hallway, she could already hear the CFO raising his voice. Something about how the hell does no one know where the 940 templates are? Followed by the satisfying sound of Greg attempting to explain a pivot table using interpretive grunts and hope. Arya passed the glass conference room just as an auditor gestured at the screen and said, "This entry is dated February 31st. That's not a real date." She didn't break stride. By the time the auditor flagged their third undocumented variance, the CFO shouted her name down the hall. "Arya, we need you in here now." She paused by the elevator and sighed slightly. "I'm afraid that's above my pay grade now," she said, not unkindly. And then she was gone. Elevator down, phone off, a breath she didn't know she'd been holding released like steam from a cracked pipe. The world outside had never looked so free. Back upstairs, the company was officially being flagged for operational negligence. Several controls were deemed non-verifiable. Vendor audit trails were marked unsubstantiated. And Trent, the man who once used Synergy to justify gutting her department, was now flipping through 3-month-old spreadsheets while explaining, "This used to work when Arya was here." But Arya was already in her car, windows down, wind in her hair, listening to Sinatra and humming along like the final credits of a very long, very sweet revenge movie. The audit report dropped like a guillotine. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs turned to boardroom screams. By the end of the week, the entire 5th floor smelled like scorched reputation. 3 days after Arya's departure, the firm's executive Slack lit up like a slot machine on fire. Words like breach, non-compliant, and how the hell did we miss this ricocheted off digital walls. The final report labeled their reconciliation procedures structurally deficient, noted severe gaps in documentation, and with the cold finality of a coroner's signature, recommended an immediate freeze on all external growth initiatives. Translation: expansion plans were dead. The CFO was under internal review. Rumor was the board found an old email chain where he told Arya to just fudge the variance this once. That alone could bury him under enough HR tape to mummify a C-suite. And Trent? Trent was quietly reassigned to business development strategy support, a title so vague it might as well have been bench warmer. His new desk was reportedly located next to the printer. People said he flinched every time someone printed a reconciliation report. None of this surprised Arya. She was already 3 days into her new job. Her new office had real windows. Her new team actually listened when she spoke. The first meeting she attended, the director said, "We trust your judgment. Build whatever process you think is best." She almost cried. Instead, she nodded once, opened her laptop, and set up systems in 6 hours that would have taken her old company 6 months and 4 breakdowns. On Wednesday, they delivered her welcome package: personalized mug, company fleece, a card signed by her entire department. One note read, "Finally someone who knows what she's doing." By Thursday, the CEO swung by her desk just to say he'd heard great things already. She didn't blush, didn't stammer, just smiled and said, "Plenty more to come." That was that. The chapter was closed. No leftover bitterness, no night sweats, just a clean, quiet satisfaction. Until Friday. She was eating lunch, turkey wrap, kettle chips, sparkling water, when the notification popped up. LinkedIn. Trent B. has requested to connect. She stared at it for a full 20 seconds, fork suspended mid-air. His profile banner still showed him grinning in front of a chart with arrows going up. Message: "Would love to stay in touch. Hope you're doing well." Smiling face with smiling eyes. She clicked ignore, paused, hovered over the ellipsis, then clicked block. No message, no comment. Just a clean digital severing, smoother than any exit interview, sharper than any resignation letter. Because some bridges deserve to burn, and in their light, you finally see the road ahead. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories. This story teaches us the profound importance of recognizing and valuing the contributions of every individual within an organization. When leadership fails to acknowledge the foundational work that keeps an operation running smoothly, and instead prioritizes short-sighted cost-cutting over essential human capital, the consequences can be severe. Arya's experience highlights that true value often lies in the invisible groundwork, the deep institutional knowledge that cannot be easily replaced or replicated. The positive message is one of empowerment and self-worth. Arya, despite being undervalued and mistreated, chose to reclaim her agency. She meticulously planned her exit, not out of malice, but out of a clear understanding of her own worth and the systemic failures around her. Her story is a testament to the fact that you have the power to define your own path. If you find yourself in an environment that does not appreciate your dedication and expertise, remember that your skills are valuable, and there are opportunities elsewhere that will recognize and reward your contributions. Always prioritize your well-being and professional growth, and never be afraid to seek out a place where your efforts are truly seen and celebrated.